And we are off. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It is Friday, December 12th, 2025. Not your typical Friday at Dolphin headquarters. However, because the Dolphins play a Monday night game. So in Dolphin world, it actually was a Thursday, which means there's no final injury report. There's no Mike McDaniel press conference. Among other things, and it's a different kind of practice on Thursday as it is on a Friday. Having said all that, we will discuss a whole bunch of different topics because this being a quote-unquote Dolphin Thursday, even though it's Friday, it was coordinator time at Dolphin headquarters with Craig Aukerman, Anthony Weaver, Frank Smith addressing the media, along with two assistant coaches as usual. They rotate those every week, and today it was the Barry dudes who spoke, that being offensive line coach Butch Barry, who right now has a lot of good reason to feel very happy with the work of his unit, along with linebackers coach, run game coordinator Joe Barry, who also has good reason to feel very happy about the performance of his group at the moment. And most of the Dolphin assistant coaches have good reason to feel good these days, with the Dolphins on a 4-game winning streak, which has them at 6-7, with a chance to get back to 500 against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday night, which would be a nice accomplishment turnaround after the Dolphins started both 1-6 and 2-7. However, where that gets them in terms of the playoff picture, probably nowhere, if we're going to be honest about it. As I wrote on Miami Dolphins on SI.com, where there's a lot of content in it, as always, it's free. The chances of the Dolphins being able to make the playoffs are very, very small. They actually could be eliminated this weekend if two of the following three occur, which is Buffalo defeating New England, 50-50, we would say. Jacksonville winning at home against the Jets. Yeah, pretty good chance that happens. Houston winning at home against Arizona. Yeah, pretty good chance that happens. And then the other one would be the Dolphins losing on Monday night. That would knock them out of playoff contention with 3 weeks left in the regular season, which would be obviously a major bummer. There is a world, however, on the flip side, where the Dolphins actually could lose one of their final 3 games and still make the playoffs at 9-8. It would require some collapses from a couple of teams among a group with the same teams already mentioned, Buffalo, Jacksonville as well, and then Houston would be another one. So we shall see how that plays out. The first concern, obviously, is the game against the Steelers, and in that vein, let us discuss the updated injury report for the second day. It's not the final one, so there will be no game status designation, although the Steelers already made one of those, which, again, is a very rare occurrence these days, and that's the one that involves linebacker, star linebacker, edge defender, pass rusher, however you want to describe him, TJ Watt, who Mike Tomlin said already is out for the game Monday night after he underwent surgery to fix the lung issue that developed this week while he was having dry needling therapy, and mishap occurred. So the prognosis for TJ Watt is out of the hospital on his way to recovery, but he will not play Monday night. That obviously is an advantage for the Dolphins because TJ Watt is the most impactful player on that Pittsburgh defense, a defense that hasn't been great. And the whole Steelers team hasn't been great, and yet they're 7-6. So who knows? For the Dolphins, before we go back to the Steelers, on the injury report, there were 3 new developments on Friday from the first injury report of the week. Good news, Aaron Brewer, who was limited in practice on Thursday, was a full participant on Friday. And Aaron Brewer, who we might add, Butch Barry, when asked to name a player whose athleticism would remind him of that of Aaron Brewer, quickly mentioned Jason Kelce, former Eagles, now ubiquitous television personality. That's obviously some nice praise right there. And Aaron Brewer has been having a fabulous season. So that's good news, obviously, there. Positive development as well with Elijah Campbell, the special teams ace, defensive back by a profession as well. He's got ankle knee issues. He did not participate in practice on Thursday. He was limited on Friday. So It's trending positively toward him being able to play. This is an issue that would affect the special teams more than anything else. The other development, however, is on the negative side, and that's starting cornerback Jack Jones popping up on the injury report with a knee injury, limited in practice on Friday. As always, if you have a player popping up in the middle of the week with an injury, it's more than likely it occurred in practice. And because he was limited and obviously started until he was injured, there's no way of telling just based off of that the severity of the injury. We'll know more when Mac McDaniel addresses the media before practice on Saturday. The rest of the injury reports the same. Devon Achane again was limited with a rib injury, but he spoke to the media after practice and sounds very confident there's no issue as far as him being able to play. He did say he was going to have some type of protection for his ribs for the game against the Steelers at Acrisure Stadium on Monday night. Exactly what that's going to entail, he didn't know just yet. The other players on the Dolphin injury report: long snapper Joe Cardona, cornerback Rasul Douglas, safety Fatu Melifonwu, offensive lineman Andrew Meyer, who remains on IR until he's activated, which probably won't be this week. Edge defender Chop Robinson and tight end Darren Waller, all limited for a second consecutive day. Ethan Bonner and Jonas Savainaya also are on the injury report, but they were full participants each of the past 2 days. The Steelers, again, had a lot of players who did not participate in practice on Friday, same as the case Thursday. Obviously, TJ Watt didn't practice either of those 2 days. As I mentioned, he's already been ruled out. The new name on the Steelers injury report is defensive tackle Cameron Hayward. He was described with a knee. He full participant in practice Thursday, didn't practice Friday. However, I'm told from people in Pittsburgh who would know such things that this is par for the course, and there is no reason to believe that he will not play against the Dolphins on Monday night. And the fact that Hayward conducted a media session about an hour after practice ended or shortly after practice ended would tell you, yeah, he's probably going to play. The other name that's significant for the Steelers is cornerback James Pierre, who probably is not one of the bigger names on a Steelers defense with a lot of those, including former Dolphins defensive back Jalen Ramsey, Cameron Hayward, TJ Watt, Joey Porter Jr., Alex Highsmith, who's become a very good edge defender, pass rusher, linebacker Patrick Queen, former first-round pick of the Baltimore Ravens. Well, James Pierre is not a big name, but he has had a very, very good season in coverage for the Steelers. He's missed both days of practice so far this week with a calf injury. That's something to keep an eye on. Another one is rookie first-round pick Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle from Oregon. Missed a game against Baltimore last week. He has not practiced this week so far. 2 days of DNP with a knee injury, and this is a Steelers defense that does not rank very highly in any particular statistical category, and is coming off back-to-back games where they gave up more than 200 rushing yards in a loss against the Chicago Bears and in the victory against the Baltimore Ravens last Sunday at M&T Bank Stadium, I believe the Baltimore Stadium is called. So a lot of things to keep an eye on over there. The Dolphins make a roster move. If you notice, I have not mentioned the name of Caleb Johnson. Well, that's because the Dolphins placed him on injured reserve on the Friday. One of 3 moves the team made to take his place on the 53-man roster. The Dolphins signed from their practice squad cornerback Isaiah Johnson, who had been elevated 3 times from the practice squad. So as we had said before, there was no way he could play another game for the Dolphins unless they sign him to the 53-man roster. Do not be surprised to see him in action against the Steelers, more than likely on special teams. Because I forgot to mention that if Jack Jones somehow turns out that he can't play against the Steelers, we're looking at potential replacement in the starting lineup opposite Douglas of potentially Ethan Bonner. Can't believe it would be A.J. Green III, who the Dolphins signed off the Rams practice squad a couple of weeks ago. Jason Marshall Jr., the rookie from Florida, maybe, and there wouldn't be Isaiah Johnson. So more than likely it would be Ethan Bonner if it turns out that Jack Jones can't play. And then the last roster move, we told you it was coming. The Dolphins re-signed tight end Hayden Rucci to the practice squad after he cleared waivers after being released by the Detroit Lions, who had claimed off waivers from the Dolphins 2 weekends ago, I want to say, or last weekend. 2 weekends ago, when the Dolphins activated Austin Jackson and Darren Waller off injured reserve. They needed to waive 2 players. One was Keon Smith, one was Hayden Rucci. Both are now back on the practice squad. Dolphins now have 6 tight ends on their full roster, 3 on the 53, Darren Waller, Julian Hill, Greg Dulcich. 3 on the practice squad, Tanner Connor, Chris Myrick, Hayden Rucci. Based on the comments from John Embry, the fact that he's much younger, if the Dolphins at some point need to make another move on the practice squad, one would think it would be Chris Myrick who would be the player to go, but we're not at that. We're not there just yet. And as I mentioned for Isaiah Johnson, the ideas would be more that he would be helping out on special teams. As I look at my notes here, you may see Dolphin media writing about and tweeting out that the Dolphins have parted ways with outside linebackers coach Ryan Crow. If you follow the Dolphins podcast, we had that a week ago to maybe 2 weeks ago, which is why the Dolphins, this came up when the Dolphins, when it was told to us by Anthony Weaver that they had brought in the former Shuey, the former outside linebackers coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, to help out the position, along with Sean Ryan, who began the season as a senior defensive assistant and then was transferred to take over working with the outside linebackers after Ryan Crow was arrested on the domestic issue. That case, as we said before, was not prosecuted. Victim did not want to cooperate. So there were no charges filed, but it wound up costing Ryan Crow his position. This is going to be the 10th meeting. It's actually interesting that the Dolphins are playing the Steelers again in prime time. It's the 3rd consecutive time they face the Steelers with a game in prime time. If we go back to 2022, the teams played in a Sunday night game at Hard Rock Stadium. If you recall, that was the game where Tua came back after missing some time with a concussion he had sustained at Buffalo. The Dolphins won that night 16-10, thanks to 3 interceptions, including the highlight of 2020 first-round pick Noah Benogany's time in Miami, a game-clinching interception in the final 2 minutes or so at the Dolphins goal line on a 2nd and 2, I believe it was. And the quarterback was Kenny Pickett, now of the Las Vegas Raiders. The time before that was in 2019 in Pittsburgh. This was a game where the Dolphins they had not won on the season so far. They were 0-6. And they got off to a 14-0 lead just like that. This was the quote-unquote tank rebuilding, resetting year, however you want to call it. And then Pittsburgh came back. And if you recall, as somebody here who has always praised Brian Flores' X's and O's, his by far worst call ever was late in the first half of that game with the waning seconds, maybe 30 seconds left. And the Steelers had the ball close to midfield, and Flores called an all-out blitz. It didn't work out. The Steelers hit a quick hitter, and Deontay Johnson scored on a 45-yard touchdown to make it 14-10 at the half for the Dolphins. And the Steelers ran away with the game in the second half, winning 27-14. And ironically enough, one player for the Steelers who had an interception on that night was Minkah Fitzpatrick, which this was a few months after the Dolphins had traded him to the Steelers for a 2020 first-round pick, who the Dolphins wound up using on offensive tackle Austin Jackson, I should say, pardon me. Other highlights among Steelers-Dolphins primetime games: 2007 in Pittsburgh, in the rain, really, really muddy field. Ricky Williams first came back after being suspended, lasted about 3 quarters. He was done for the year. I believe it was like a broken sternum. And then one of the flukiest plays in Dolphins history, Brandon Fields punting from deep in Miami territory, and the ball just stopped dead, created a massive divot inside the 50-yard line, again, because the field was so muddy. That was crazy. And then the last one I want to mention, in a Dolphins-Steelers primetime game, 2006. This was the kickoff game for the NFL. Remember, the Steelers won the Super Bowl in the 2005 season. The Dolphins played at Pittsburgh in the opening Thursday night game, actually led 17-14 in the second half. Dante Culpepper at quarterback. And then Pittsburgh turned the game around pretty quickly with an 87-yard touchdown pass from Big Ben to tight end Heath Miller. and the Steelers went on to win that game 28-17. While I'm in a little bit of a nostalgic mood here, quick history lesson on this day in Dolphin history. The most famous December 12th, probably 1982, Dolphins at New England. Quickly, 5 seconds to see if you can remember what happened on that date for the older Dolphin fans. Yep, Mark Henderson, who work release parolee, driving a snowplow in a blizzard at Old Foxborough Stadium in a game where the offense was really tough to come by for either team. Got onto the field, cleared a spot for kicker John Smith to make a field goal under very tough conditions. Makes the field goal. Patriots win 3-0. Don Shula was livid. Didn't really affect the Dolphins because they wound up going to the Super Bowl that season anyway before losing to Washington and John Riggins 27-17. 1988, another December 12th. This was a very cool one. Dolphins were playing at Cleveland in the Monday night game, and it wound up being a shootout, 37-31. The Dolphins won. What made it very cool is that the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns that night for most of the game was Marino's longtime backup, Don Strock, who had come into the game after Bernie Kosar was injured. Dolphins winding up pulling out the win at the end. But very cool, the Marino Strock shootout there. And the last one I have on this day is December 12th, 2011. This relates to what happened on Thursday night. If you guys have seen the clip of normally very mild-mannered Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Todd Bowles dropping the F-bombs after the game, after Tampa Bay blew a 28-14 lead, gave up a 3rd and 28 situation for the game-winning field goal for the Atlanta Falcons. Well, this is relevant to the Dolphins and to this date in Dolphin history because on December 12th, 2011, Todd Bowles was named interim head coach of the Miami Dolphins after Tony Sperano was replaced before the end of his 4th season. The Dolphins were 4-9 when Bowles was hired to replace Sperano. Dolphins went into the rest of the way. Todd Bowles went on to become head coach of the New York Jets and now the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it's weird to me that I'm hearing reports or seeing reports that his job might be in jeopardy when he's been head coach of the Buccaneers 3 years. This is his 4th. And they won a division each of the first 3 years. Okay, so it's weird. Anyway. Okay, as I mentioned, today was coordinator day and assistant coaches in terms of the media. Some of the highlights that stood out, some nuggets over here. Butch Barry, as I mentioned, is a guy who can take some victory laps right now to a certain extent about the performance of the offensive line, which has come a long way since it was maligned at the start of the season. And he made an important point because I asked him, interesting, about how far the offensive line had come along from the start of the season. He kind of answered it in saying why it had come along. So far, it's clear it's come along like a very long way. And he mentioned cohesiveness in that area. And this is a point I had made before, where a lot of the issues with the Dolphin offensive line in previous years, along with perhaps poor performance, poor technique, is there was always a change. It was rotating players. And then this year, what happened is they had the fluky injuries in the opener against the Colts. James Daniels, Austin Jackson, both lost. Both going IR. And then tried some things at right guard. Keon Smith got a couple of tries at it. Was replaced by Daniel Brunskill in the Buffalo game. Cole Strange replaced him. Larry Borum replaced Austin Jackson at a right tackle. And from week 4, for a stretch of 8 games until Jackson came back from IR, you had the same starting offensive line. Same guys playing together all the time. And that does make a difference on an offensive line. And Butch Barry absolutely mentioned that. And he also talked about the progress of Jonas Avainaya from the start of the season to now, which is obviously very noticeable. And basically, it comes down to, like, the more you play, the more you see things, the more you learn. And if you have the right attitude to learn and absorb and learn from your mistakes, you can progress. And then it was interesting too, because then he was asked as he was leaving the podium for one final question, what physical attributes make the Dolphins so bullish on Savainaya's potential as an NFL offensive lineman? He very quickly said speed and power. And that was that. Other notes, other comments that stood out to me. Joe Barry spent 2 years when he was defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers. Could not stop talking about how much he respects, loves Aaron Rodgers, and still very impressed by the way he's performing at the age of 42, and mentioning that the arm strength is still there, and also pointed out that Rodgers is so good at the game winning within the game, the little details of playing quarterback, for example, calling for a quick snap if he sees the defense either not properly aligned or having 12 players on the field, things of that nature. And again, but there was quite noticeable just how much praise and how much respect Joe Barry has for Aaron Rodgers. And then as I'm looking at my notes over here of anything that stood out, Anthony Weaver talked about Rasul Douglas and the impact he has made on this secondary, which came a day after Mike McDaniel also spoke about Rasul Douglas, and what stood out to him about Rasul Douglas is what kind of the leader he has been. And a lot of topic of the conversation with the coaches today was this thing that Dolphin defensive players have been doing. I don't know if you've caught the highlights of this, is every time a player makes a big play on defense, his teammates gather around him on the bench and they'll chant his name in rhythm. So, for example, Rasul Douglas had a pick against the Jets. He'll be Rasul Douglas, Rasul Douglas. And so it was explained today. There was Anthony Weaver and Joe Barry said the same thing. It was Tyrell Dotson and Jordan Brooks one day at a defensive meeting decided to greet everybody who would walk in the room by doing this thing. Zach, Sealer, and everybody. And it started. And it's just carried on out to the field. And whenever somebody makes a big play, you will see that happening. And something else that I noticed in the game against the Jets that to me was kind of semi-significant. If you recall, when I'm trying to remember who it was who scored the touchdown. Well, after one of the touchdowns, you saw Dolphin players doing that little, what's the word I'm looking for? A little replica of the little children's game. And right now I'm drawing a blank as to what it's called, but I don't recall the last time the Dolphins had a coordinated touchdown celebration like that. And it's almost as if there's a newfound joy in this team. Obviously, they're feeling good about themselves the way they're playing right now. Again, the flip side to that is what the hell took so long, and this is all great, but more than likely, even if the Dolphins were to win out, they're in bad shape in every tiebreaker scenario. Again, because their conference record is so poor, they're 3-6 in the conference right now. The best they can do is 6-6, and as I mentioned on the show yesterday, I believe I did. There are certain teams that already have 7 wins in the conference, so they have put themselves in a really tough spot with the poor start to the season and the most painful losses. I know we're going to talk about Carolina, the one against the LA Chargers, because that's another AFC team. And it might not matter in the end, depending on how many games the Chargers win, but they face a tough schedule. And if it turns out that they lose some of their final 4 games, even a lot of them, Dolphins have to overtake them. They can't just be tied with them because the Chargers already have clinched tiebreaker with 3 games left. In any scenario, whether head-to-head with their win against the Dolphins or if it's multiple teams, because then it comes down to conference opponents. The first tiebreaker is head-to-head, but it has to, if there's more than 2 teams, it has to apply with a sweep. Otherwise, you either can't use head-to-head, then it goes to conference record, then it goes to common opponents, which becomes a little bit more complicated. So on that note, we are going to wrap it up. A couple of programming notes. The Dolphins Collective is not airing Friday night because of scheduling issues. It's going to be done Saturday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be back here on Sunday evening, 7:30 p.m. We will do a live preview show of this game against the Pittsburgh Steelers at Acrisure Stadium, along with all of the latest developments, including the final injury report, which will be coming out on Saturday. So until then, thanks for watching, everyone. Please check out the website, free content, MiamiDolphinsOnTheSide.com. For the podcast here, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And for those who prefer their podcast in audio form, we are available wherever you get your audio podcasts, Google, Spotify, Apple, all of those fine places. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and your Saturday as well, and your Sunday and your Monday, all of the days.